Ready to maybe try a career change? Maybe. Well, today we're diving into the world of leather work. Specifically, we're going to be checking out the role of leather wet processing department manager.
It's a cool job.
It really is. So let's break down what this job actually looks like, day to day, and also where it fits into the bigger picture of the leather industry as a whole.
You know what I think is funny?
What's that?
Most people, they don't realize how much work goes into turning animal hide into like a buttery soft leather jacket. It takes a lot, like a whole team.
Yeah.
And guess who's at the helm of that team in the wet processing department?
The manager.
You got it. The leather wet processing department manager.
Yeah.
And they're the ones making sure those raw hides get transformed into, a material that's ready for the next step in making leather.
So it's more than just like getting the leather wet then, huh?
Way more.
So what does that actually look like on a day-to-day basis for a leather wet processing department manager?
So imagine like hundreds of raw hides show up.
Oh.
That's where the leather wet processing department manager comes in. They oversee like everything. Washing and cleaning those hides, getting rid of any parts you don't want, to like managing the chemicals and materials that are used, which can be pretty strong smelling.
Oh, I bet.
It really is a delicate balance, between art and chemistry, you could say. If you mess up even one small thing in the recipe, you use the wrong amount of lime during the liming process.
The leather's ruined.
It could be. It could become brittle or too soft, or it just won't meet the quality standards.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a great example. So it sounds like there's a lot of responsibility riding on the leather wet processing department manager's shoulders, especially with all those chemicals involved.
100%.
So we're talking leather, people, complex processes, and a whole lot of chemistry.
Nailed it.
That sounds like the stakes are really high. Are there any resources out there that can help people who might be new to this, dealing with those challenges?
Definitely. There are platforms out there, like RoleCatcher, that are specifically designed for this. They have a lot of really helpful industry-specific resources.
Oh, that makes sense. So managing those manufacturing recipes, is that something you can learn on the job, or do you need to already know that stuff?
That's a great question, and you really hit the nail on the head. It's a lot of on-the-job learning.
So you don't need to be a chemist to apply?
Not at all. But they're going to be managing a team, coordinating supplies, developing those manufacturing recipes. You can think of it kind of like a chef perfecting their secret sauce,
Okay, yeah.
but for leather.
Mhm.
And then they have to make sure everything's up to quality and safety standards, which are really strict.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of moving parts, and they're responsible for like conducting this whole leather orchestra.
Wow. For someone who's picturing themselves in this role, it sounds like it checks a lot of boxes: high stakes, creative problem solving, working with a team.
It's a cool job.
But let's be real, it's not all going to be glamorous, right? What are some of the pros and cons that go beyond just getting to work with leather?
You're right. It's not always pretty. So platforms like RoleCatcher can give you an idea of the salary, which is usually pretty good.
Which is always nice.
Right. And it's a chance to be creative in a really specialized industry. But there are definitely some downsides too.
Like what? What should people be aware of?
Well, for one, it can be physically demanding. We're talking like being on your feet all day, working with heavy machinery sometimes. And then there's the potential exposure to chemicals. You really got to be careful. Safety is super important in this line of work.
So we talked about what it's like being a leather wet processing department manager, but how do you know if it's the right job for you, besides just liking leather?
That's the big question, right? I guess it comes down to having a mix of hard and soft skills.
Okay, what does that mean exactly? What kind of skills are we talking about?
So on the technical side, it's important to know about production and processing techniques. Like you're working with the chemistry of the leather.
Okay.
You need to know about different types of hides and the chemical reactions involved in tanning and treating them, and then the machinery too. It's all important.
Sounds pretty technical. So is that something you can learn as you go, or do you need to go to school for that?
That's the interesting thing. A lot of people actually come from totally different fields, like manufacturing or even something that doesn't seem related at all.
Really?
Yeah, like I met a leather wet processing department manager once who used to work in food science.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah.
But it kind of makes sense, right? Like knowing how different ingredients work together and stuff.
Exactly. And that's where the transferable skills come in. RoleCatcher actually does a great job of highlighting those, by the way, the transferable skills.
Oh,
Yeah, because employers look for things like active listening and problem solving, being detail-oriented, being able to coordinate a team. Those are like golden skills in any job, but especially in a busy place like a leather processing plant.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that's actually really encouraging for anyone thinking about switching careers. So let's say you have those skills,
Yeah.
you're ready to move up in the leather world. What does that path look like?
I think RoleCatcher has some cool graphics that show typical career paths.
Mm.
It's not always straightforward, but you might start as a leather wet processing department assistant. If you're just starting out,
Hmm.
that's where you get your hands dirty, learn from experience.
That's where you learn about those potent chemicals, right?
Yeah, exactly. Then you can become an operator.
Right.
That means you're handling more of the machinery, dealing with any issues that pop up, like leveling up.
And each level means more responsibility, right? Like maybe you're working more with those manufacturing recipes we talked
Mm.
about.
Yes. As you learn and get more experience, you can become a supervisor. So then you're overseeing a team of operators, making sure everything's flowing smoothly, double-checking those recipes, making sure everyone's doing it right. And that's where those leadership skills are really important.
Yeah, because now you're not just responsible for yourself, you've got a whole team to look after.
Yep. And of course, the goal for a lot of people is to become the department manager.
For sure. But what does it actually take to go from supervisor to manager? What makes those leaders stand out?
Well, it's not just about the technical stuff anymore. It's more like you're the conductor of an orchestra,
Okay.
making sure the whole department is working together to meet the targets, managing the budget, never letting safety or quality slip, thinking ahead,
Mm.
finding ways to work better and faster, always solving problems, encouraging the team to do their best.
Sounds like the department manager has a lot on their plate. But it also sounds super rewarding, seeing everything come together from those raw hides to a finished product.
For sure. And knowing you played a big part in making it happen.
Speaking of making it happen, let's shift gears a bit and talk about how we can transform our listeners' job searching. We've talked about the skills, the career path, but how do you actually get the job? Because that can be pretty tough. We'll be right back after the break to chat about how RoleCatcher can help you ace that interview and navigate the whole job market. Stick around.
And we're back, ready to talk about the last step in becoming a leather wet processing department manager.
The interview.
Yes, which, let's be honest, can be a little scary.
Oh, tell me about it. I remember this one interview, they asked me to describe the whole liming process
Really?
in detail. And then they wanted me to explain how I'd motivate a team to meet a deadline at the same time.
Wow, talk about multitasking.
I know, right? It was a lot. That's why it's so important to be prepared. I bet a platform like RoleCatcher could really come in handy for that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They often have modules where you can practice answering interview questions. It's a great way to build confidence.
Like having your own interview coach. So what are some of those tricky questions you might get asked in a leather wet processing department manager interview? You know, the ones that might trip people up.
Well, they're definitely going to want to know about your experience. Be ready to talk about what you've done in the past, specific projects, times you've had to solve a problem, adapt to unexpected stuff.
Because there's always something unexpected happening, right?
Yep.
Especially in that kind of fast-paced environment.
Exactly. And here's the thing. It's not just about, proving, the technical stuff. They're also looking for those leadership skills, those soft skills.
Right, right. So how do you get ready for those questions, the ones that are more about personality?
Well, RoleCatcher, they often give you examples of those kinds of questions. Things like, how would you make sure you're following all the environmental rules? Or, what would you do if someone on your team wasn't performing well?
Ooh, yeah.
It's really about showing you can think on your feet, make tough calls, and be a good leader.
Those are hard situations to deal with, especially in an interview when you're already stressed.
Totally. That's why it's good to have some answers ready beforehand, just in case. Think of specific times in your career that show those skills. Like maybe you started a new safety procedure that prevented accidents or figured out a way to get production back on track when things were delayed.
Yeah. Having those stories ready to go not only shows what you can do, but it can probably help you relax a bit too, right?
Definitely. It's a lot to keep track of.
Okay, so we talked about interview prep, but let's dig a little deeper into how RoleCatcher can help people find jobs.
It really is like a secret weapon for job hunting.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How so?
Well, it's all about finding the right job for you, not just any job.
Okay, so how do they do that?
So it's all about this smart matching system they have. You upload your CV and their AI, it analyzes everything, like your skills, your experience. Yeah. And it figures out what keywords and categories you fit into. Then, get this, it compares your profile to actual job descriptions that are out there and tells you which ones you're a good match for based on those keywords. It can even tell you if you might be missing a certain skill for a job you're interested in.
Wow. So you don't have to waste time changing your CV for every application.
Exactly. It's like having someone else do all the boring stuff for you.
That's amazing.
And it gets even better. RoleCatcher doesn't just match you with jobs, it actually connects you with the companies that are hiring. They have this whole system where companies can use the platform to find people with specific skills.
So you could get a call out of the blue for a job you didn't even know about.
It's totally possible. No more like scrolling through endless job boards and hoping for the best.
That's a game changer.
Totally. It makes the whole process way less stressful.
This has been so helpful. So for our listeners who are excited to dive into the world of leather and become a leather wet processing department manager, what's the one thing you want them to remember?
Don't just think about it. Go for it. There are so many opportunities in this industry, especially for people who are passionate, eager to learn, and, not afraid to get their hands a little dirty.
Literally.
Exactly. Do your research, check out those resources, and don't be afraid to take a chance.
And remember, you don't have to do it alone. RoleCatcher can be your guide, your coach, your secret weapon. Who knows, maybe you'll be the one leading a team, creating amazing leather, and changing the industry. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.